Hello everyone, I'm so glad that you could join us today. We are going to be making this ski mask. This will be nice and warm. It's using a worsted weight yarn, and our pattern is kind of bubbles or bobbles. So this is fun to make, super easy, and pretty fast actually. So the yarn that we're using for this project was a Super Saver Red Heart yarn. It is color camouflage. It's 100% acrylic, and it's a number 4, a worsted weight yarn. Now the only thing I didn't like about the yarn is it's kind of scratchy. So this is going over someone's face, so it was iffy. But it's actually softening up even as I work with it and feel it. So I think it'll work out in the end. And it's camouflage, so my son loves it. Okay, so let's get started. We're doing a rolled edge on this project. So our first 8 rows are just straight stockinette stitch, and you can do an E-wrap cast on just to not have to go back and bind off with waste yarn. And so what we're doing is we're going to E-wrap the end. So I have 80 stitches out, and we are going to start with a slip knot. So cross your yarn, reach through the loop, grab the other yarn, place it on your first stitch, and E-wrap. E-wrap is just making an E with your yarn. You're going under the needle and over counterclockwise. So let's get all these E-wrapped, and then you're going to want to push your loops back and make sure all your needles are still pushed forward. Okay, so now that we have our E-wrap done, we are going to bring our carriage across and knit our first row nice and slow. Okay, make sure all of your stitches knit well and that you don't need to fix any. Now I'm going to use tension 5 for this project. And I'm going to make sure my row counter is reset on 1 because I went across once already. And I'm going to knit 8 rows. I'm going to hang my weights first. Now what we're going to do is we are going to do a tuck stitch, and this will look like little bubbles. And in order to do that, here's our pattern. So what we're going to do is we are going to pull every 4th needle forward. We're going to knit 5, then we're going to knit a row of all stitches, and then we are going to pull every 4th out again, but this time skipping 2. So we'll go in the middle of those rows that we pulled forward before, and then we'll knit 5 again, and then we will knit all needles. So here's what that will look like. I'm going to use my 1x3 pusher, and I am going to pull out every 4th row. Okay, and so what you're going to do is you're going to put your machine into hold. However that works on your machine. So for my machine, all I have to do is move my Russell lever back to tuck position. You may have tuck buttons, or you may have a machine that doesn't do that at all. If your machine doesn't do tuck stitches at all, you can still pull your needles out into hold position, knit your 5 rows, and then you'll move your needles back into working position so that all needles will knit. Okay, so make sure both of your Russell levers are back, if that's the kind of machine you have, or both tuck buttons are pushed, and we are going to knit 5 rows. Okay, so so that was 5 rows, and now we are going to knit all needles. So what we need to do in order to do that is we are going to pull our Russell lever forward. So on your machine, do what you need to do to make all needles knit. Okay, and then you want to make sure all your stitches look okay. Okay, and we're back. I had to go put my raising bread in a pan. So I'm going to see if I can get this done before it finishes raising and I finish baking it. That would be perfect. So after we knitted all stitches, so now we're going to go back and we are going to pull out our opposite needles. So we started on the end, so now we're going to go over 2 and we're going to pull out those stitches. And then we are going to knit 5 rows. Make sure both of your Russell levers are where they're supposed to be. Okay, so now you should be on row 19 and we are going to switch our Russell levers and knit all needles. Then you'll want to check all of your needles to make sure they... Okay, so now we are going to pull forward the other needles that we had done the first time. Okay, so now we are going to knit 5 rows. Make sure your Russell levers are back or you have both your tuck buttons pushed in. And tuck for 5 rows and then knit all needles. Okay, so you'll want to pause your video now and continue this pattern until row 80. And when we get back here, I will let you know how my bread is doing. Okay, we're back. I just put my bread in the oven. So we have a little bit longer to get this a little further in the project. I don't think I'm going to finish. Okay, so we're at row 80. And what we're going to do now is we are going to cast off our middle third here of the stitches. So since we have about 80 stitches, a third is right around 26, 27. So I'm going to cast off my middle 26 stitches. So I'm going to go, here's my 0, so I'm going to go 13 to the left. 11, 12, 13. Sorry, 13 to the right and 13 to the left. Okay, and to cast off, I'm going to do a crochet stitch cast off. I'm going to use my latch tool in order to do that. And I need a piece of string. We're going to bind this edge off and then we're going to cast on another edge. Okay, so I'm going to make a slip knot and I am going to put it on my end stitch here. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the first stitch on our needle. I'm going to pull this through. Then I'm going to pull back my next, I'm going to push it up. I'm going to pull back my next needle, push that up, grab my yarn, and pull through. And I'm going to continue doing that until I've bound off all of my 26 stitches. Okay, on this last stitch, I am just going to pull through, and then I'm going to carefully take my work off of my gate pegs. Okay, and then I am going to tuck that under. I'm going to pull out those needles. Now that we have cast off our, using our crochet method, we are going to cast on these stitches again, and this is going to be our eye hole. So what we're going to do is we are going to cross the yarn, and that's going to be our first loop. We're going to bring the yarn above the needles into our latch hook and bring it down and pull it through that loop. We're going to do that again with the next needle. We're going under the needle, pushing our latch hook up, grabbing our yarn and pulling it through. Under the needle, pushing our latch hook up, grabbing the yarn, and go under the needle. And we're going to continue to do this across our stitches that are pulled out. Okay, so now when you get to the end, just pull your yarn all the way through that loop and push your loops back on your needles. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are actually going to push out every other needle again using our pusher, because we don't want a row of just knit stuck in that stitch. We want to continue our pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and push out all those needles. Now you'll see when we get here, these are already pushed out, and we don't want them pushed out, otherwise it won't knit. So what we're going to do, I'm actually going to flip this over, and I am going to pull these back into working position. And then down here, I am going to push out my every fourth needle. And I am going to slowly knit across. So remember, our rustle levers have to be back if that's how your machine works, or your tuck buttons need to be pushed in. And we're going to knit across. Okay, remember our pattern was back and forth 5 times and then knit all stitches the 6th row. Now you can see that we have a nice little hole here where our eyes will be. Okay, so we are going to continue our pattern right up until the top of our hat. I'm probably going to go 72 stitches, but that will include the 6 that we just did. So I'm actually going to go and change my row counter back to 6 because I'm on row 6 here, and I'm going to go to 72. See you then. Okay, we are finished. That was a lot of work. You can see I hung some weights down here. That was where our eye opening was, and that was just to keep my tension on those needles that we had rehung. I also put some on the end over here. I could have pulled up my ones from the bottom like I did over here. You'll also see a little stitch marker over here. That's because I have a loop of string there that got caught on my gate pegs, and I didn't notice it until later after I had already done those, and I wasn't going to pull out a bunch of rows to fix that. So I will just go back, I will cut that in half, and then I will tie it together and it'll be fine, especially since it's right there on the edge, and we'll sew that in when we're done with our hat. To get our nice close close up of our hat, all we're going to do is thread a string through all of our stitches and then pull it closed. And then we're going to sew up just a little bit, just so that we don't have any holes. Okay, so I will show you what I mean. I'm going to use a good amount of yarn. That way I can sew it up at the end as well. So I'm going to thread my needle. Okay, and I am just going to start going right through all of these stitches. I'm going gonna get that end stitch as tight as I want it, because I don't want that to be loose. And I'm just going to keep going across my hat. Okay, I'm at the end. I went through my last stitch, so now I'm going to just take them off my needles. So I'm just pulling all my needles out. As I pull this, they will all come off. There we have it. There's our hole for the eyes. Okay, so what we're going to do to turn this into a hat is to just kind of gather up this top. And this is going to, I'm just pulling my string that I just threaded through everything. My kids are having a blast in the hallway. This is just all going to gather up. Okay, so now we are going to sew up the seam in the back using basically a mattress stitch. Okay, so to finish up our hat, we're going to find our first stitch and pull our yarn through it, and then we are going to mattress stitch. Now if you remember to mattress stitch, we're just going in the hole that our yarn came out of. So you'll have to unroll your work. And when we pull up our needle, we're going to look for a bar. We're going to go through that. You don't have to pull it tight right away. Then we're going to go over the other side, find out where your string came out, lift up your needle, and find that bar, and pull it tight. Okay, so you're going to keep doing that all the way down to finish your ends. So when I get down to this bottom, I am going to, since this is rolled, I'm going to tack this down here. I'm just kind of going to sew it down on both sides so that it stays rolled when it's together. Otherwise it'll end up, you'll kind of have it straightened out and it won't roll good anymore. So you'll want to kind of just tack that back there. So the other thing, on the front of our hat, we have this, I have a hole here. I don't know if you ended up with a hole or not, but I'm going to just kind of sew that up as well. And this side I'll sew my ends in. I'll sew up anything that looks like a hole. When I tried this on my son, it was a little bit too big here, so I may end up sewing up some of these just to make the eye opening smaller so that fits him better. But I'll try it on him again once I get the back sewn together and see how that is. So I hope you had fun making this project. I would love to know what other kind of projects you would like to see done on the knitting machine. So let me know down in the comments what kind of projects you would like to see instructions for. Now this was probably too wide. Well, this was too wide for my son. I put it on my husband and it fit him fine. So there was a hole over here that I had to close up, no big deal, but I did end up stitching this closed just a little bit farther in for my son so that there wasn't as big of an opening. So you can adjust that to the person that you are making it for. So this hat didn't take super long to do. Probably the knitting took me maybe an hour altogether. The cast on and cast off here around the eyes took an extra few minutes. And then the sewing up probably took 15 minutes. So I did this over 3 days just because I'm busy. I am a mom of 6. They have to eat like all the time. It's ridiculous. So I started this one evening. I finished knitting it the next day during, nap quiet time. And then I finished sewing it on the couch the next morning. So, you do what you have to do. But it really didn't take that long to make. And I could make it even faster the next time and without videoing and stuff. So it's a pretty quick hat, and it was fun to do, and it was fun to see the pattern come out in the hat as well. And the pattern for this hat can be found in the description and the comments below. So pick your favorite project and let's show your knitting machine some love this week.